criminal is resisting arrest." The officer pulled out a taser and tased me. He then dragged me out of the car. Suspect seems to be armed and carrying drugs. He proceeded to strip me to my underwear, right there, in the middle of the busy road. He found drugs in my pocket that I knew weren't mine, and he produced a gun from thin air and said it was mine. Why would I worry about quitting my day job when I'm so good at this? He looked so pleased with himself and did nothing to hide it. He put me in handcuffs once more and dragged me over to his car. I'm Wally, a Black American, and I am now an orphan. I'm 32 years old and home for the week because my father died in a car crash. My mother died when I was young due to an overdose, and my father and I have spent years trying to clear her name. He'll never get to see her innocent again, just as I'll never get to see my father again. As the undercover head of the police force, I lived a double life. The government had received numerous complaints about corrupt officers, so I went undercover to expose the truth. I just didn't realize how quickly I would start uncovering the bad eggs within the force. We were in a hearse on the way to my father's funeral, where I would lay him to rest beside my mother. Suddenly, the night was pierced by the ominous flashing of red and blue lights, and my heart clenched. Our family has had numerous run-ins with the police in our time, and they're all ended poorly. But to hijack a funeral? That's low. Never in my 50 years. The driver seemed as perplexed as I was angry, but he pulled over and the squad car behind us pulled in too. From the wing mirror, I watched as the cop exited the car, one hand of his gun and the other holding a flashlight. He moved towards our car, and I could see an ugly smirk on his face. He was about twice my age and looked like he had triple the ego. "Gentlemen, how are we this evening?" "Officer, is there a reason you pulled us over?" "Who is the police officer here? Who's asking questions, huh? You or me?" "Sorry, sir, you are." "Exactly. I asked you how you were." "Absolutely grand, on account of the fact that I'm about to bury my father, and a cop has just pulled us over." The officer scoffed at us, and it was all I could do to sit with my fury locked inside of me. Who was this man to pull over a funeral procession and ask us how we were doing? "You might want to give a little less lip, mister. Now, license and registration." "Sir, this is a funeral." "Did I stutter?" The driver shook his head and then reached into the door side pocket where he produced his papers and his license. He hands them over. The cop inspects them, looks at the coffin in the back, and then squints at me and the driver as though we were hiding something. "Where's the body going?" "The cemetery." I'm not sure how that was the wrong thing to say, but the officer's eyes narrow on me, and then that smirk turns into a sneer. "That's so. Step out of the vehicle." I took a deep breath. I knew that any kind of pushback would just make things work. So I did as he said. I got out of the car and made sure to stand tall. I refused to be scared. I refused to be cowed into submission on the day I was supposed to bury my father. The officer circled around me, eyes bright with humor. "You look familiar. Ever been arrested before?" "No." Lancaster smirks and suddenly shoves me against the car, patting me down with unnecessary force. I could feel the eyes of the driver boring into me, and slowly, the cars that had been behind the procession slowed down. Aunts and uncles and family friends were climbing out of their cars to see what was slowing us down. The officer looked at his audience in delight. "Well, you are now." He twisted my arm so painfully I thought it might snap, and he slapped cuffs on me tight enough that it dug into my wrists. "What the hell are you doing?" "Reading you your rights." "What the heck for?" "Suspicion of transporting illegal substances. You blacks can't be trusted. You got anything in that coffin I should know about?" "Officer, that's ridiculous. Of course not. Please have some respect." "Don't you dare tell me what to do. Now, let's get you to the station for questioning." I was furious, but I knew what had happened to my family when they had run-ins with the police. I clenched my jaw, breathed deeply, and let myself be escorted to the squad car while the rest of my family continued to the funeral. 12 hours later, I was sat in a holding cell, staring at the opposite wall. My suit was rumpled, but I wasn't about to let them get to me. I refused to show any emotion. The sun was starting to rise when the officer returned. He leaned up against the bars with a grin as he looked me over, like a predator assessing his prey. "They're finished searching your old Popsy's coffin. You're lucky they didn't find anything." You've held me here for almost 12 hours with no evidence, and now you've realized you falsely accused me of a crime. If I were you, I wouldn't quit your day job." "What was that? Was that a threat? Get down and give me 10 push-ups now." When I refused, Officer Lancaster opened the cell door and started hitting me with his baton. "You think you know everything, but you don't. I'm in charge here, not you." After he bruised every inch of my body, he walked out and left the door open. "If you know what's good for you, you'll leave and never try to piss me off again, because this was just a small show of my power. I can do whatever I want and no one can stop me." He was so sure of himself that I knew I would do absolutely anything I could to ensure he was given a taste of his own medicine. I knew I needed to hatch a plan, but first, I needed to go home and take some pain medication. He'd beaten me badly, and I could barely walk without wincing. 3 weeks later, my plan was well underway. I was driving back home from my father's grave when I saw the red and blue flashing lights once more. I immediately turned on my dashcam camera. Well, look who we have here. If it isn't Mr. I wouldn't quit my day job, license and registration. I said nothing as I handed it over. I knew how this was going to go. Step out of the vehicle. Why? Criminal is resisting arrest. The officer pulled out a taser and tased me. He then dragged me out of the car. Suspect seems to be armed and carrying drugs. He proceeded to strip me to my underwear, right there, in the middle of the busy road. He found drugs in my pocket that I knew weren't mine, and he produced a gun from thin air and said it was mine. Why would I worry about quitting my day job when I'm so good at this? He looked so pleased with himself and did nothing to hide it. He put me in handcuffs once more and dragged me over to his car. I smiled at him, and suddenly he looked a little less confident. "What are you grinning about? You're about to go to prison for a long time." "Sure I am." Seeing him suddenly so unsure made my heart soar. Anything to wipe that smug look from his face. At the police station, he cuffed me to the bench where the whole station could see me, still in my underwear. I had marks on my chest from where the taser had hit me. I had dirt on my face from where he pressed me into the ground. The other officers were looking closely at me, and I could see that some of them recognized me. "Lancaster, are you sure you want to arrest this man? Don't try to tell me how to do my job." I was sitting in the lobby, on full display, for 4 hours. I was cold and miserable, but the thought of revenge was enough to keep me going. I refused to show weakness. Later that evening, when Lancaster threw me back in the cell with an orange jumpsuit, I vowed to humiliate the man as best as possible. A month passed while I was sitting in jail. I worked out, read books, and plotted my revenge. I had visitors with whom I brought into my plan. They were excited to get back at the officer too. And some of the other officers were also keen to see him gone. By the time I was sitting in court, waiting for a verdict, I had the whole event planned out. "All charges against Mr. Wally are hereby dropped due to lack of evidence. This court is adjourned." Lancaster looked furious. He stared around the court like he was waiting for someone to jump up and say it was a joke. But the only joke here was the police officer. 10 months later, almost an entire year since my father was laid to rest without me there, the plan was in place. In that time, I had been arrested 3 more times and found innocent. The cop couldn't understand why none of the charges stuck. He would soon. Finally, the day arrived. It was the annual police ball, and all the police officers were invited to a huge hall. Officer Lancaster had been told he was nominated for an award. I was there, but I was in a police uniform. He didn't recognize me, even as he shook my hand. "I would like to welcome Officer Lancaster to the stage." Lancaster sauntered up the stage like he was the king of the castle, and the moment he was at the podium, the police chief cuffed him to the podium. "Search him." Just like that, all the humiliation he had inflicted on me was bouncing right back onto him, and in front of all his colleagues too. They found drugs on him. We all knew it wasn't for him to use. It was for him to plant on unsuspecting innocents. He was stripped to his underwear, and no matter how much he shouted and cried out, no one was listening. They were too busy laughing. Then, while he was on the stage shivering, a video started to play in the background. It was all the false arrests he'd made, showing him clearly planting drugs and guns on people. It showed the brutal treatment of his prisoners. It also showed him cheating on his wife, and she stood up on the stage next to him and threw her wine on him and announced she will be divorcing him. The whole crowd of cops stood up and jeered at him. He was led away, begging to be released, and taken to the lobby of his police station, where he was made to sit for hours and hours, cold and undressed and covered in wine. "What was it you said about being good at your job?" I laughed and laughed. When he eventually arrived in court, I suggested that he serve time in prison and then pay back his debts to society by cleaning graves in the cemetery and giving up his luxury home for a permanent bed in a cell. The judge agreed. Every night after a long day's work, Lancaster was led back to his cell, where he was forced to sleep where anyone could watch him. He deserved worse. But this was the most I could do within the confines of the law. Unlike some people, I wasn't about to break the law in an attempt to pretend to uphold it. It turned out later on that Lancaster had been the cop who had arrested my mother for drug possession. He'd forced her to take the drugs, and because she was sick already, it made her OD. He was charged with murder. Further investigation into him showed that he'd entered into a car chase with my father with no warning and had driven him off the road. He'd hidden all evidence, but a private landowner handed over video footage. He was put back into prison for the rest of his life. Many criminals in the prison knew Lancaster's story, and they hated him. He was forced to clean toilets and scrub floors for inmates every day while wearing an orange jumpsuit that read, "Disgraced Cop" on the back. Many police officers turned a blind eye to how the inmates treated him. Over time, the relentless abuse took a toll on his mental state, and he began acting like a madman, claiming that ghosts were haunting him. One night, in a fit of desperation, he even attempted to commit suicide, but he was saved at the last moment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.